Next session, Dialogues and Interpretations, is on India's rich arts and crafts heritage. We have with us artist and designer Rajini Sarma Balachandran, crafts revivalist Laila Tyabji, and filmmaker, writer, and archivist Yousuf Saeed, who shall now present their discussion on the dynamic and changing nature of our arts heritage.
Hi everyone. We three, I don't have a hand mic, so I came to the podium. We three, Laila Tyabji, a Padma Shri, a founder of Dastkar, Yousuf Saeed, a filmmaker and a writer, and myself, an artist and a political scientist, appreciate this opportunity given to us by Nirmala Lakshman to present our views on the heritage of arts and crafts. We hope to dispel some entrenched views like fashion is frivolous, meant for the airheads, and they bring out the deep relevance of poster art, which is not merely kitsch art, but has a tremendous influence on our relationships, and the much taken for granted attitude about the cultural and economic role that the craft person plays in our lives. Let me begin my presentation on the iconic saree and the expanding fashion empire. She is enigmatic because she is versatile. She can inhabit a grandmother's wardrobe as well as the world of Verchasi. She is antique, yet she moves with the times, sometimes wrapping a Mylapore mami, and at another times a young fashion model, a warrior, a marathon runner, a karate expert, a teacher, a prime minister. The list goes on. She innovates herself into a full spectrum of possibilities. She is fluid, she is plain, but she is also opulent and embellished like a bride. She can transform herself with one swish of her pallu, from conservative to formal to functional to retro. She is the saree and a lived-in garment which moves with you. And she reminds me of Mona Lisa.
Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have named you. You're so like the lady with a mystic smile. Are you warm? Are you real? Mona Lisa, are just a cold and lonely, lovely work of art.
Her magic continues because we cannot quite place her as to whether she is pret-a-porter or haute couture or a luxury item or a plain street style wear, because she is worn by the Behenjis as well as the Bollywood divas. The saree's aesthetic eclecticism has broken all national boundaries long before the words like fusion, global, and glocal was formed. She could walk the Florentine catwalks even though she is embedded in the past. The impact of traditional saree influenced Italian designers like Germani, Maruccelli, and Giovanni Versace, and Mignoloni Guggenheim in the mid-50s, and French couturiers like Jacques Jean Paquin and Paul Pure. So these designers found that the saree's beauty was in the textiles, in its fluidity, and not in its complex tailoring. I would like to relate an anecdote to allay the fears of many who feel the saree is too functional for the modern woman who is multitasking and is a professional. Her name is Lata. She is 61 years old, and she ran a marathon race from the town of Pimpli in Maharashtra without sneakers or any fancy gear and won. It's not necessary to fight, it's not impossible to fight a war and be a Maharani in luxurious silks. This is Rani Chimnabi of Baroda, 1872 to 1958, who wore a 9-yard Marathi sari and was posing in front of her kill, which is a tiger 9 feet long. And this is not her choice attire. This was the attire worn by many royal women at that time who engaged in this sport. Professionals today feel the need to fashion themselves in clothes that do not have a traditional look, because they feel that there is fashion policing in the workplace and they would like to be as one with the others and not stand out. I have the picture of this lady who was probably the first South Asian to get a doctor's degree from the Women's Medical College in Pennsylvania. The worldview in 1885 was Orientalist. India was considered backward, resistant to change, and sari was considered as something that is continuous with the tradition and opposed to the notion of style change. It's not that you should wear a sari, but what is interesting in this picture is the other two women. The other two women are a Syrian and a Japanese. And what you find is the sari is still flourishing today when the rest of the world has adapted to Western clothing. It is evolving, and it is an unstitched drape which has been evolving for 5,000 years. And it differs from community to region, and has a vast style of draping styles. Why is the sari iconic? Why should we say she is quintessentially Indian? It's because of the layers of meanings that we have given her. In the early 20th century, we find the mood of nationalism and resistance to colonial rule, and it resulted in us visualizing India as Bharat Mata, covered and enveloped with the sari, which is the colors of the flag, highlighting the Swadeshi movement and the patriotism behind the sari. The next painting is a painting of mine. I painted this when I little realized the connotations behind the Bharat Mata. And I painted it with two colors of flags because I have allegiance to two mothers, a real one and an adopted one. Raja Ravi Verma distilled his brilliant legacy of academic realism into his paintings of Lakshmi and Saraswati. And the allegorical impact of this was so immense that it has grabbed the entire nation. We do not imagine Saraswati in a little black dress or a lehenga or a salwar kameez or blue jeans. We always picture her in a sari. And this was done by the brilliant academic style of realism by Raja Ravi Verma. We are now moving along with the spinning world of sari as the colonial, post-colonial exotica. She is an indigenous sari, juxtaposed alongside with global and Western styles. It is the identity of the Desi chick, negotiating, recasting her own imagined styles of Western and Southern Asian styles to suit her public and private space. Her style is hybrid because she is of local origin and it has global connectivity. Fashion gives her anxiety, and she wants to resolve her anxiety by a desire to be distinctively Indian and yet simultaneously international. So the slogan for the sari goes, anything goes, wrap the pallu anywhere instead of the waist. There she is wearing a dhoti sari and then a bikini sari and reinventing it with jeans. So this is the spinning wheel of the sari. Here is Sabyasachi. The clothing is a hybrid mix of local, global, Indian, and Western elements. In fact, in Sabyasachi's sari that Vidya Balan is wearing, you would see that the lapels look so European. This renegotiating the style and trying to fit in is seen everywhere today. Why? It's 2016, it's Chennai in Radhakrishna Shalai Road, the Music Academy season. And there she is again, renegotiating her identity in Rani pink chiffon saree, studded with Swarovski crystals, with long puffed sleeves, which is really called the leg of mutton sleeves by the colonial women, a Jimmy Choo clutch bag, and a barely there detailed high-heeled shoes. Her hair is scraggly, and she has tied it in a bun in a scraggly style with an Alexander McQueen accessory. She seems to be Harrods and DLF Emporia put together. Then there is another one in blue jeans with a silk kurta with churras and a multicolored Crocs and a Dolce & Gabbana bag. And then there is another celebrity that I see at the door. She is a TV actress. She is wearing an MS blue Kanchipuram with no designer label, and a kalamkari blouse, and a very flat bata sandal. So fashion designers are continuously trying to respond to the fast changes of the cultural, economic aspects of contemporary India. So how would I categorize a sari? Is the sari changing fashion or unchanging tradition? India inheres in us the ancient, the mythic in gods, goddesses, religious customs, time-honored traditions, a flourishing economy, an IT sector, and a booming real estate, and a multi-billion-dollar film industry. These contrasting images all get together and make what is called incredible India. Nurturing this paradox is the creative task of the fashion designer, who has to cater to the demands of a consumer market with a middle class whose social class can be accepted and wants it accepted, and its global and local identity worried about it. And it all hinges on keeping up with the fashion choices of the Kapoors, the Jonases, and the Kardashians. So when I see modern Indian art and I see fashion historiography, I see there is a link between the two, because both of them had to contend with the legacy of nationalism and colonialism, and both of them wanted to break away from the Western style and impose and have something distinctively Indian. The fashion designers added bling. India is bling obsessed. You have to have value for the material you buy. And bling, it comes from the craftsmen, embroidery, zardozi, beadwork, block printing, and this is what they superimposed in order to have fashion as a bearer of tradition, but a site for showcasing India's globalized modernity. This kind of attitude of going into tradition is very often called reorientalization. Actually, the Western Oriental gaze refocused to our own benefit. Rahul Mishra says the best way to be a good designer is to be Indian. Dior is French, Armani is truly Italian, and he wants to showcase Indian textiles. Wendell Rodrigues went into Goa and studied Goan costumes, and he is a minimalist. And yet, Ritu Kumar is one who does vintage clothing, and she is a maximalist. Tarun Tahiliani once said that India is bling obsessed, bling is in our tradition, and he said Indian weddings are like a Baroque court where power and status are served in a film pudding of excess. The world is shrinking, modernity is breaking boundaries, and what we eat, what we see, what we wear is breaking apart, and boundaries are breaking apart. Alexander McQueen, modernity is no longer Euro-American. This is an Alexander McQueen with a Kanchipuram sari. This is also another Alexander McQueen. But is this Alexander McQueen, or is it Tarun Tahiliani? Is this Alexander McQueen or Abraham and Thakur? It is hard to tell because boundaries are vanishing. The seduction of the saree will continue, and she will continue to be the wrap. The only thing she asks is that she belongs to a paradigm which is uncut drape, and she is averse to the cut and the scissors, and the designer who cuts it is going to ruin the saree. And I can almost hear the saree screaming, "Let me be me." Thank you. Yousuf Saeed is going to give us a brilliant reason why poster art is as important as fine arts.
Thank you, Rajini, and thank you, Hindu group, for inviting me here and giving this opportunity. I'm going to talk about, since this panel is about art and craft, what I'm going to talk about is something that is difficult to actually put into any fixed definition of art. I mean, most of us actually don't even call this art. I'm going to talk about popular art, or what some of us call the bazaar art. Of course, the artists who create this kind of art, for them, there is no definition, there is no distinction between a contemporary art and what some of the scholars or art historians call the popular art or calendar art. For the artist, it's just an ordinary kind of painting. But this kind of art, which we see every day on the streets, which we see being used by ordinary people, most of us ignore, most of us just bypass this, and we don't really give it a serious thought. It's very recently that some scholars or art historians have started taking it seriously and started studying it, because when you study this kind of art, it's something that is that probably you won't even find in an art gallery or a museum or a library. It's a very transient, ephemeral kind of art. You see it one day and the next day it disappears, or it transforms into something else. So I've been looking at this art, and I've been looking at the artists who produce this, and especially looking at the religious kind of iconography. And what is most important, and I'm going to talk about actually the religious faith, the pluralistic religious faith that this country has. And it's important to talk about that in today's time, as we see how the fundamentalism is kind of damaging our society in a major way. So it's important to document and also highlight this kind of art form. So let me, you're all familiar with this kind of scene where a barber shop or just an ordinary street where you will see these kind of posters being put up. The poster art actually it is put up in spaces which are the most secular spaces, I would say. And when I say secular, I don't mean non-religious. I mean secular in the sense that where you don't have, you're unbiased about someone else's religion. So these are spaces where the multi-faith kind of identities emerge, and these are places where anybody can come, anybody can revere this kind of art. So I've been documenting some of these posters and also looking at how they reveal this multi-religious kind of identity that exists in India. Now, we all know that the poster art was actually started more than 100 years ago by this artist, Raja Ravi Verma. He was one of the first artists in India who started doing paintings in this Western style, where he used models to make caricatures or portraits of people. And he was using this concept of light and shadow and the dimension, the perspective. If you look at the art which was existing before Raja Ravi Verma, it was rather flat. So this is the first time when the Western technique of painting is emerging in India. And Raja Ravi Verma was quite popular because, people suddenly realized that, this kind of photographic quality of art, he was a much sought after artist. A lot of people wanted to get their portraits made by him. But very soon he started doing these religious paintings, and this is the first time that Hindu gods and deities were actually portrayed in a very photographic kind of way, where human models were used to depict these kind of deities and gods. His paintings become so popular that he started this printing press in India for the first time, a color printing press, where a large number of these prints were made and distributed. And since then, almost all artists who have been doing the gods and goddesses, they have been kind of using the same style. So almost every god and goddess was painted in this kind of realistic style since then. Of course, many other printing presses and many other kind of artists in several parts of the country, like in Calcutta, in Pune, in Bombay, artists and printing presses came up, but they followed more or less the same style. Now, I have been looking at this art form, and I've also been focusing especially on the religious art. I'm sure you all seen the Hindu gods and goddesses, but you're also familiar with a lot of Islamic art, Islamic paintings, Islamic religious art, which I've been working on and I've written about it. So I looked at this kind of painting, which sometimes we also call bazaar art, because we have the calendars which were done in the similar style. And bazaar art is basically very, very highly colorful, highly kind of attractive colors that are being used, because it caters to a certain class of people. So I have been looking at who are the artists who've been doing this kind of art. And very interesting, throughout the 20th century, there are a number of artists who've been doing most of these paintings. One of them is, for example, H.R. Raja, who's done a whole lot of paintings which were meant for calendars. And you all know that South India, especially Chennai and Sivakasi, are the centers where a lot of poster art and calendar art was produced, and even now it is produced. But these artists are coming from different parts of the country. For example, H.R. Raja comes from Meerut, a city in Uttar Pradesh. As I mentioned, that I've been working on this Islamic popular art, so I've been collecting a whole lot of these paintings. And my curiosity was that, as opposed to the Hindu gods and goddesses which you find in abundance, what do the Islamic prints signify, or what do they depict really? Because you can't really go, there are no gods and goddesses in Islam, obviously. And in fact, there is a whole debate. A large number of Muslims actually discourage the use of images. But despite that discouraging attitude, the number of images that you get to see are amazing. The variety of images that you get to see. So a whole lot of images so I was curious to know that where did the Islamic images come from, and how were they printed? And I was lucky enough to find that actually Raja Ravi Verma's press was printing some Islamic images also. For example, this image that you see, this is from the early 20th century, the shrine of Kaaba. There are several other images, Islamic images, that were printed in Ravi Verma's printing press. Then, of course, many other artists, such as this painting, this has been done by artist Balakrishna, and the publisher is Jyoti. I think Jyoti comes from Sivakasi. So the basic idea is to say that the Islamic images are not necessarily being made by Muslim artists or Muslim publishers. They are being done by all kinds of publishers. A Muslim artist doing a Hindu image and a Hindu artist doing the Islamic image. So that's the beauty of this industry. And it's also the audience or the buyers who are buying these images, somehow for them it doesn't really matter who is the artist or who is the publisher. For them it's just, they use it for a certain purpose. They use it to decorate their homes or to kind of venerate these images. Now, as I said, that some Muslims do discourage the use of images. For example, the figurative images, the human figure is something that is discouraged in many Muslims' homes. So you would see that some images are just about a shrine. Mecca and Medina are of course the central shrines, but apart from that, a lot of local shrines, local Sufi shrines have been used in these posters. So for instance, this shrine of Nizamuddin Dargah in Delhi, where you don't see a single human figure in it, even though if you go to this shrine, it's always crowded, there will be devotees all around. But the artist has ensured that no human figure is made so that it doesn't sort of, hurt somebody's sensibilities. So, but that's not true in all images. So, for example, this image is of this Baba Tajuddin from Nagpur, and there is a female devotee who's sitting next to him, and there are very interesting kind of frame that has been used in this image. On the top, you see on the corners, top corners, there are some numbers written in Arabic or Urdu numerals. They are some kind of talisman or taweez, as we call it. These numbers you will probably find in Hindu images also, because there are similar kind of astrological calculations and designs being used. The iconography, the numbers, the mythologies, they're all so much intermingling between Hindu and Islamic images, because the artists are the same, the users are the same, the publishers are the same. So it's very interesting ecology that is developing, a kind of visual ecology that you can see. Another image, again made by Balkrishna. And if you look at this closely, there is, I'll show you a close-up of it. You see these two white doves, and there is a kind of a blood coming out of their feathers. Now, what is that? What could that signify? So it's very interesting how, symbolism has been used in these images, even though they are meant for a popular popular user. So several people have given several kind of interpretations to this. Some people say that in Christian mythology, for example, a bleeding heart, a pigeon or a dove has a certain symbol. And in Islam, they say that, there are these doves or the pigeons who are hovering around the Medina shrine. And a lot of religious poetry, Islamic poetry, talks about the doves of Medina, and some people, like they're not able to visit Medina or Mecca because of the paucity of funds, so they would imagine that I'm sending a dove to Medina to take my salam or take my, devotion. And sometimes this could also mean that, I'm unable to go to Medina, so I'm so grieved, I'm so pained. So in a way, this blood is coming out because of my grief of not being able to go to Medina. So very interesting symbolism, very interesting mythologies, as you can see that it's been done by Balkrishna. Again, painting by Kishore. I'll just flip through some of these images to give you an idea of what these. This is a painting done by H.R. Raja, but now I will reveal to you what is the full form of H.R. It is actually Hassan Raza Raja, again a Muslim painter who's done this Hindu painting. Then there is this artist called P. Sardar. P. Sardar comes from Kolhapur in Maharashtra, and he's actually a Muslim. And he was a great devotee of many Hindu deities, and he's been doing this kind of images. So the entire 20th century is actually full of such artists, and these artists we don't know. Nobody talks about them. I mean, we talk about the great contemporary artists, but nobody talks about these calendar artists who've been doing this kind of art. Again, P. Sardar has done this. And very interesting ecology of in these paintings. Anyway, I think my time is over. So, but I mean, what I was trying to say is that there is this need of a multiple faith, a kind of a multi-faith identity that we need to have in order to appreciate this kind of tradition, this kind of syncretic and pluralistic tradition that India has had. I'd like to end on this painting, which is again a painting of 6 major Sufis. Actually, 5 of them were from India and 1 is from Baghdad. Even though these 6 people were not contemporaries, but they are in the same silsila or order, and their painting has been done. So it's not that all Islamic art is without without any human figure. Some of them they do depict the human figures, and they're kind of venerated by people, they're respected by people, and there is a very interesting ecology, a visual ecology that emerges in the bazaar art as we see. Thank you.
I'm so sorry I don't have any pretty pictures, because I'm supposed to talk to you about craft and there was just too much to say and too much to show. The buzzwords these days are Make in India and Skilling India. India is trying to sell itself to the world as a manufacturer, and at the same time agonizing on how it can upskill the millions of aspirational youth that are looking for jobs and a sustainable wage. Thousands of institutes, courses, and training centers are being set up all over India. Hundreds of government departments, committees, and task forces are brainstorming strategies. From air hostesses and call centers to sophisticated IT, hotel management, and engineering. A gamut of skills, products, and career options are being set in motion to conquer poverty and unemployment, to win orders from India from the rest of the world. In all this, we seem to have overlooked something important. To quote the old adage, we seem to have missed the wood for the trees. India is already an amazing repository of extraordinary skills, skills that the rest of the world has lost and is now mourning. While we try to reinvent ourselves and acquire skills that other more advanced countries acquired decades ago, we ignore this existing gold mine. Instead of investing in, developing, and promoting these unique skill sets and knowledge systems, we are allowing them to die. For lack of equal opportunity, the owners are leaving the sectors in droves. I'm talking, of course, of the skills of our weavers and craftspeople. What a tragedy. Even more grievous, since the skills currently being expensively promoted encourage potential job seekers to migrate to India's already overburdened cities. This places a further overload on our already inadequate urban infrastructure. We heard this morning of the tragedy of Srinagar and Chennai. On the other hand, craft skills are based in rural India, made from locally available materials and perfectly suited to rural production systems and social and cultural structures. They are also, and this is crucially important, bring rural women into the economy, creating double-income households in otherwise poverty-stricken areas. One of the paradoxes in a nation full of paradoxes is India's attitude to its crafts and craftspeople. We always project crafts as something of the past that poor people make when they can't do anything else. Craftspeople themselves look down on their own skills and are abandoning them in droves whenever opportunity arises. Earlier this year, I was in China. The Chinese, who are extraordinarily savvy about their strengths and weaknesses and what works in the competitive global marketplace, have just announced that craft is one of the 8 major sectors they're going to concentrate on in the next decade. Master craftspeople are given subsidized housing and work in luxurious, fully equipped studio environs, complete with air conditioning and piped music. Their salaries reflect their perceived status in society. They are part of the professional middle class. The Chinese realized that cheap touristy bric-a-brac will not command the price that handicraft should rightfully get. So low-priced tourist souvenirs are now mass-produced in factories, often in synthetic polymers, and alas, mass-exported to India in bulk, competing with our own handmade products. I don't know how many of you realize that most festival idols, rakhis, bangles, and toys sold at melas in India are industrially mass-produced from China. Meanwhile, genuinely skilled Chinese craftspeople are encouraged to think big and add value to their products and given every means to learn to do so. India is always feeling threatened by China's phenomenal growth and wanting to emulate it. This is one area we do have something to learn from them. But instead of thinking big, we actively encourage our craftspeople to make things smaller and cheaper. The descendants of the master artisans who crafted the Taj Mahal now make little pillboxes that sell for $1. Some years ago, I took Shantibai, a 23-year-old Lambani tribal, the youngest ever craftsperson to win the National Master Craftsperson Award for her embroidery, to Sweden. Shanta stood on the top of an airport escalator in Stockholm Airport for the first time in her life. She had flown in a plane, exhibited a major new work at one of Europe's premier art museums, lectured at the Boras Design School, become the first Lambani ever to travel abroad. She was heady with the recognition. "Isn't there a World Cup for embroidery?" she asked. "I'm going to win it." Why not? Mirror work embroidery and other traditional crafts should be given due recognition as creative arts as well as challenging professional skills. But sadly, crafts and craftspeople in India have no status, which is why recent data tells us 15% of them leave the sector every 10 years. What is impeding craftspeople from taking their place as proud 21st century professionals? One reason, of course, is the changing craft scenario and the disappearance of old structures like the Guru Shishya Parampara. The respect that craftspeople were accorded in that traditional social structure is a thing of the past. Secondly, and most importantly, is a conflict for the young craftsperson between the need for formal education and learning the family craft skill. Today, they're torn between learning ancestral knowledge systems in the traditional way and risking missing out on other educational opportunities. So either they become unlettered artisans placed very low on the social and professional hierarchy, or if they do opt for formal education, they despise the traditional skill but do not often qualify for alternative occupations. When Daskar began our Ranthambore project 25 years ago to create livelihood options for the relocated villages around the park, one of the people we encountered was Gendilal, a leather craftsperson in Kundera village. Vipul, you remember taking his picture. He had lost his living due to local herders and farmers opting for new plastic chappals instead of his sturdy but more expensive leather ones. We helped him and a group of 5 or 6 other leather workers use their amazing punching, plaiting, and cutwork skills to make sandals, chappals, bags, belts, and accessories for the urban market. These proved immensely popular, and soon Gendilal and his group were traveling all over India, supplying to retail stores as well as selling directly through our bazaars. Gendilal was able to send his son to a fee-paying school, and the next news was that he had got admission to college. But sadly, college taught the boy to look down on the very profession that had given him his education. When he completed his BA, he couldn't get a job, but he didn't want to continue in the leather business. In vain, we told him that his education and literacy would give him that edge to take the family skills to the next level. These days, he loiters around Savai Madhopur town, occasionally getting a part-time job at the village school, but generally unemployed, his aspirations far exceeding his abilities. He prefers being an out-of-work BA to being a leather craftsperson. How do we re-establish the social acceptability of craft? If craftspeople are to be on par with other professionals, they need skills other than simple craftsmanship. They need entrepreneurship, merchandising, finance, and IT know-how, access to technology and design. Where do they acquire this? How do we embed these functions in crafts communities without impacting on the cultural and social sensitivities of their traditions and way of life? How do we guard against a commercial commodification of craft? 4 decades ago, I was a brash young merchandiser designer working with Gangarappa, a master weaver in Pochampalli. It drove me crazy that he would never work on my new samples till he had groomed, fed, and garlanded the family bullocks, sprinkled his hearth with water, bathed, decorated his loom with fresh flowers, and completed an elaborate puja. He would then weave a ritual few inches on the oldest ancestral loom, passed down from his forefathers over the centuries. Then he would agree to begin on something new. By then it would be well past 11:30 and I would be hopping up and down with impatience. I respected his disciplined ritual, but did not then grasp that it was the essence of his extraordinary creative mastery. He told me later that when he wove those first inches on the family loom, he communed with the spirits of his grandfather and great-grandfather and received their blessing. Something I heard again later from Wankar shawl weavers in Kutch. It is that spirit going beyond hand skills or market demands that we have to understand and preserve while taking crafts and craftspeople into the global marketplace and 21st century. Crafts and handlooms are a potential global force. They're also a part of our cultural DNA. There's both opportunity and conflict between these two sides of the same coin. We must make them work together. Each community, skill, and product is different. It needs to be studied before we craft solutions. Macro schemes have to learn and grow from micro initiatives. Making and skilling is a perfect mantra, not just for the craftspeople and their production systems and products, but for bureaucrats, policymakers, and all of us working in the sector. We too need to remake and reskill ourselves in preparation for this great opportunity, to realize India's unique strengths and not treat them as weaknesses. Ananda Kumaraswamy, the philosopher historian, said a century ago, the most important thing that India can give to the rest of the world is simply its Indianness. If it were to substitute this for a cosmopolitan veneer, it would have to come before the world empty-handed. Something for us to remember today. Thank you.
Any questions? We can't really get the question.
I think he's saying that can you talk about entrepreneurship and the commodification of craft? Yes, that's what I'm saying. That these are, I don't think that they are contradictions. The point is that it's a very delicate balance, and you need to do it with care and sensitivity, making the craftspeople themselves part of this partnership and learning what works for each community.
If there are any more questions, we have a couple of minutes left.
This is a question to Laila Tyabji. It doesn't relate to what you spoke about, except peripherally, which is in terms of entrepreneurship. Now, I understand that you're the person behind Dastakar, which has done a tremendous job in helping encourage people like that, and more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, helping us be able to buy these things. However, just looking at it from a purely consumer perspective, as a buyer and nothing else, it's not so easy to buy these things in most places. Can it be made a little more easy?
Well, that's really the paradox that I was talking about, that it's not just craftspeople that have been marginalized, but even their products, because there is a kind of perception that India, today's consumer, really doesn't want to buy so-called, inverted commas, primitive, old world handicrafts, but they want to buy branded products made either from abroad or industrially produced in India. Our own experience in Daskar, which is a very small NGO, is that even given the difficulties of people access to genuine handicrafts, when they are there, people respond to them. And I think we're very fortunate in India that we have a foot in both camps. It's not a either-or situation. You can wear a pair of Levi jeans, but you can wear a lovely tie-dye mirror-work top with it. And I think Indians are discovering that, but as you say, access is difficult. You don't find many crafts in the malls. And retailers in India, I think because they've seen so much craft, they associate it with something that is a bit passé. And that's the challenge for organizations like Daskar.
I have this question for right here at the back, for Ms. Tyabji. I would like to know what do you think is the role of design intervention in filling this gap? You spoke about people viewing craft as fuddy-duddy and old, but there is also a lot of design intervention going on with the support of NGOs like Daskar or Craft Council or Paramparik Karigar. I see amazing work at some of their exhibitions. How can we scale this up? And how can we make better craft and more sophisticated craft available to the public easier, as somebody pointed out, and also narrow this gap between art and craft? What is the definition of art versus craft? After all of contemporary art in India have their origins from craft traditions. So how do we narrow this gap and how do we scale up design intervention?
Well, the second bit I'm not going to get into because then we'd really be here forever. I think because the concept of art and craft has changed so much over the centuries in India, it's a very complicated relationship. But yes, design is necessary. Craft cannot remain static. The consumer, the lifestyles to whom they cater are changing, and craft is an economic activity, and basically it has to respond to market forces. But I think the two words which I have said before is awareness and sensitivity. A designer cannot work in a craft tradition without having studied it a bit, having seen what its cultural and social origins are, what the directory of motives and designs and techniques are, and also to know a little bit about the technology of the craft, how is it made. Unfortunately, in India, for a lot of people, design is seen as surface ornamentation. That if you change the design on that papier-mâché box, you've done a job of design. I don't think that's it. You have to create new papier-mâché products with functions that suit the lifestyles of contemporary Indians. And if you can do that, and you can make it, again, a question of balance and sensitivity, then you're doing something wonderful, and I can see a big sign coming up saying it's a wrap. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much to all the speakers. Thank you. We shall now break for tea. Please be back in your seats in the next 10 minutes. Thank you.